business tips to successfully start and run your business so your business doesn't run you. And more importantly, we provide personal development tools to create a better version of yourself to provide the solid foundation for your life and business to stand upon. This is the Biz Reveal, and I'm your host, Craig Sawyer. This week's episode is sponsored by Sawyer Health Solutions. Protecting what's important to you is what's important to us. Get your free health insurance quote at SawyerHealthSolutions.com. With a multi-angle viewpoint on learning, education, and self-development, Joe Houghton breaks down how to execute an effective virtual workforce. He reveals how to set up a comfortable and efficient workspace, advantages and challenges to remote workforces, and effective forms of communication in the virtual workspace environment. After the show, learn more about Joe Houghton on his LinkedIn profile. This is the Biz Reveal Podcast with this week's guest, Joe Houghton.
Hello, and thanks for having me on the podcast,
Sure.
Craig. It's good to be here. It sounds like we're half a world away from each other. You're in what,
Which
Florida?
is pretty cool, though. I like that. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that where we've got to, certainly in the last year, particularly? This working from home. I mean, I'm sitting at my kitchen table with a photo of South Africa behind me, which is where my wife actually comes from. But
cool.
But yeah, the whole working from home thing has been facilitated so much by Zoom, and by all the the WebEx and all this kind of stuff. And I suppose, yeah, that's one of the things when we kind of discussed today's podcast, the stuff about working from home, how easy it is, but maybe some tips and tricks around it as well, around the gear, around how to set yourself up at home, to do that stuff well. That's perhaps something that I can maybe share a few ideas from. I wear many hats. My main job, I suppose, the job that pays the mortgage, is that I'm a professor at the business school in Dublin,
Okay.
the UCD Smurfit School of Business, and I run a couple of master's programs in project management, of all things, which I did for 20 years in the commercial environment. I ran kind of teams all around the world for GE and various big multinational companies. Just after 2000, I moved to Ireland, and I decided to kind of switch careers a little. I did an MBA up at the Smurfit School, and then left my corporate role, and decided to do a bit of teaching. So I ended up starting the Masters in Project Management at Smurfit and doing some teaching, mostly from the college campus. But even back then, 2005, so we're talking, 15, 16 years ago, I also started teaching remotely, doing mostly Skype at the time.
Okay. Yeah, we all remember those
days, right?
Nobody
uses Skype anymore, do they?
Right.
I don't think I've heard Skype kind of mentioned for a long time now. But so I guess I've been in this online space, teaching, consulting, helping people figure stuff out, if you like, for 15, 16 years now. So Zoom wasn't quite as big a panic for me, I suppose, as it was for many people. I mean, it was a bit of a shock, wasn't it? Almost a year, almost to the day, I think, from now. The kids were sent home from school in Ireland. I don't know what it was like in the US. But
yeah, I think it was a year ago earlier this week. Yeah.
Yeah. It was the Thursday of before Paddy's Day. And the kids came home, and then our Taoiseach, the kind of, the Prime Minister in Ireland, came on and basically told us all about COVID. And that was the first most of us had heard of it. And as a college professor, I found myself with all my classes suddenly online.
Right.
And we weren't teaching anything online. It was all fully in class. All my consulting work disappeared overnight. Various industrial training, commercial training, gigs, that kind of stuff, because every single company just stopped.
Right.
With COVID for 2 or 3 months. as everybody tried to figure out what was happening. And so pivoting into the online space is something that I did from an academic perspective, but also from a professional perspective with those companies that I was helping. And a lot of that was helping them get onto Zoom and get onto WebEx or get onto Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, they didn't have a plan before, and then I guess, COVID, if you're going to take a one main positive from it, is it did get businesses and schools alike, all across the board. I mean, COVID affected everybody. It did get them thinking differently, and we needed that. And so business as a whole, education as a whole, the world as a whole has gone more technology because of what has happened with COVID, and that's going to progress us a lot more too. And I want to talk about that today while we're in this discussion. Is going forward. Even when this COVID thing's gone, which God, I hope it's gone soon, right? I mean, it's well on its way, but how is that going to change business going forward or education going forward? Are we now going to see a lot more of this online stuff stay permanent, or will it go back to a lot more in person? I'd like to see the in-person stuff, of course. I don't want it to get to where everybody's gotten so impersonal that we can't be in front of each other. But it is nice to be able to use the technology when it's appropriate.
I fully agree. And I mean, I've been advocating online teaching for a while, a number of years, a while. But I think this past year has seen an acceleration because we've had to. And isn't it amazing? I mean, if you watch, I mean, let's set aside all the awfulness of COVID, and, let's not forget that it has been awful for many people. And, kudos to the frontline workers and the medical staff and everybody that have kind of kept us going. I mean, all our problems as teachers and as online learners, if you like, it's kind of first world problems, isn't it? I always like to keep that in perspective, that we've had it relatively easy just trying to figure this stuff out. We've not been, dying on ventilators and stuff like that. It's how do I get my mic to sound right? And how do I figure out my Zoom calls and stuff? But even in that context, it's been very difficult for a lot of teachers and a lot of business people to figure out, how do I support my staff? How do I reach my students? How do I engage people through a 2-inch Zoom window, with this little camera pointing at me and stuff like that? So even though that's perhaps not as life-threateningly serious as, being an ICU nurse, it's still serious, because teachers and business people who've had to communicate like this and set their teams up to communicate like this have gone through a huge learning curve. And I think are still going through a huge learning curve. And one of the things that I've been doing more over the last 6 months than probably any of my other consulting gigs is actually helping people do that. Advising them on, well, what are the best tools to use? What are the techniques that you use on Zoom? What do I need for a home office?
Well, let's start there, because I think it does start. And I spoke last year. It was a few months after. Excuse me. Is a few months after COVID had started, that I was speaking with a chiropractor here locally on the podcast, and we were talking about how the home office is now affecting people's physical well-being, because now they're just slapping a laptop on the kitchen table and going to town, and it may not be the best situation for them. Whereas those of us like myself who have worked from home for years, we have the appropriate desk where the monitors are at eye level. You don't have to worry about moving your neck down and then things like that. So let's start with the people who have planned on working from home. What type of things should they be looking at and considering when building their work from home workstations? Yeah.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because I mean, I don't know whether this is videoed or not, but if this is videoed and people can both see you and me, I mean, just look at you in your Zoom window at the moment. You're sat back in your chair. You've got a proper office chair. You've got a pair of cans on, so that you're isolating the sound in your ears. And, the kids may be screaming in the next room, but if they are, I can't hear them.
Thank God they're not.
Yeah, that's right. You've got a decent mic, which is placed, around about mouth height. So you're not having to hunch over and talk into a microphone and stuff like that. And you're looking at eye level at your camera. So just by looking at you, we get a lot of the answers straight away to that question of, well, what do I need? You need a camera at eye level. Mm-hmm. That's one of the most common issues that I see with people on, these calls these days. They have their camera lower down. And as soon as your camera isn't at eye level, you're hunching.
Right.
You're hunching over, and you see people's face comes in like that. And, you've got that distortion, haven't you? Because they're getting too close.
Right. And I think that's probably mostly because they're using a laptop camera, right? And if you have the laptop sitting on your lap and you got the screen bent backwards and you're looking at the ceiling fan, right? I think that's the most common view my wife gets of all of her students when she's teaching is, you get the ceiling fan and she always has to tell them that all I can see is your forehead and your ceiling. Bring it down some. But, you use the tools that you have at hand, right? Because, it was a surprise. It's not like they went out and bought webcams and, monitors and desks, right? They just have to work with what they've got.
Yeah.
But you're right. That is the most common view that you see is people looking down, same way we do our phones. It's not good for your neck. That's for sure.
It's not. No. Probably the best thing that I bought last year was a $15 laptop stand. Okay. And this thing just opens up and allows you to put your laptop at an angle like this. Now, that's actually a nice angle to type on as well.
Sure.
Because the keyboard is now diagonally kind of sloped down towards you. But it also raises up the laptop camera by another 4 or 5 inches, which is for many people is probably enough to get it to near enough eye height. If not, put it on a couple of books and just raise it up a little bit more as well. But those little laptop stands, and you can go onto Amazon or wherever and, get them for very, very small money. They make a lot of difference. For doing this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing is, whether you can afford to go out and buy a special webcam or not, make sure that the camera that you are using is clean. Right. One of the things that I do when I'm not teaching is I run a small photography training business. But it's amazing how many people have never actually bothered just rubbing that bit of the screen at the top of their laptop because it's covered in finger marks and oil and stuff like that. So if you're a bit fuzzy and misty coming through your webcam, just try cleaning the screen of your computer.
And for the people who want to start working, let's say that you're one of the few people who haven't been as affected by COVID and, forced to work from home, like teachers and things like that. But, maybe you have children at home and you want to start, being closer with them during the day or maybe you just, like myself, I'm just more comfortable working from home than I am from the office environment. And I have the type of job where I can work from home. What's the first piece of advice that you would give somebody making that transition from working in an office environment to the working from home environment?
I think the most important thing, if you can do it, and I realize not everybody can do this, okay, is if you're going to decide to work from home, find a space in the house that you can make your workspace. Don't work from the kitchen table unless you absolutely have to.
A dedicated space for
because if you work from the kitchen table, there's no blurring. There's no differentiation between your relaxed time and your relaxed space and your working space. And we need that kind of mental differential. So we have the box room upstairs set up as a little study. And, my wife is a psychotherapist. I teach online and all my college stuff is done online and my consulting is done online now at the moment. And whenever possible, I'm in the study. Now, if Penny's got a client, she's in the study with the door closed because obviously there has to be the privacy for psychotherapy. But if she's not in the study, then I am. And if she's using the study, then I'm down on the kitchen table, which is, that's it. We've got a small house. But if you can set aside somewhere with a door that you can close, which is your quiet, uninterrupted workspace, then that's it.
It just needs to be a separation from normal life to the work life.
You need that mental separation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very wise because otherwise it's kind of like bringing your work home, right?
Absolutely.
And you want to have that separation between the two to make sure that you don't feel like you're at work when you're at home, or vice versa.
And we are now. I mean, like it or not, when we're at home, we are at work now.
I wonder if the design of houses will change going forward too, with that in mind. With more people working from home, because I have been reading some articles lately who have mentioned and they're saying, hey, this is going to start being more of a permanent thing. And as it should, it saves a lot of costs, overhead, by having work at home teams. And we'll get into that in a moment as well. But, if more people are working from home, I would think that there's going to be more dedicated workspace. So when they're building homes, I wonder how these builders are going to be advancing going forward as well. If there were going to be more dens, more studies, home office space created in the house when they start building them now.
I think there will. And I mean, I think also, I don't know about in America, but certainly in Ireland, the lead time on kind of showmers and kind of super sheds for the garden, where you put in a little home office, which is outside, if you like, has gone through the roof, that kind of stuff. So
we call those she sheds.
She sheds. Yeah. Huh. But those are becoming very popular now.
I don't think I've seen that here yet, but I'm sure it's on the way. I mean, it doesn't take long for news to travel like that to get a new idea. So we were talking about teams, and this is an issue that's close to home for me, because in health insurance, I have, team members underneath me, other agents. And this is a problem that I've run into in the last year or so, is when I'm hiring new agents and I want to train them locally. So I'll actually have them training here with me in my home office for like an 8-week training program or something like that. And then, off on their own to work virtually from home. It has been difficult. Because it's hard to tell people, hey, you're going to be training from my house. It does take a special kind of trust to invite people into your home.
Yes.
But that's a completely separate issue. But when you are working with virtual teams and you are not face-to-face, you do lose a lot of that personal touch and that trust building process that you would have if you're face-to-face. So let's talk about, working with virtual teams. What's the advice that you would give with starting and maintaining virtual teams that are underneath you? Okay.
And I mean, I've taught this for 15 years. I run virtual teams for 20 odd years, all over the world. So I'm not just talking about this, if you like. I've actually done this just like you've done it. It's no different from a regular team, apart from the fact that the communication difficulties, as you said, the communication difficulties are more. So you have to make more effort as a team lead or as a manager, to both set up communications that work for everybody. And by everybody, I mean, you've almost got to find the lowest common denominator of technology and the tools that you use and stuff that everybody can use. You've got to make sure everybody's trained up to use those and also equipped to use those.
Right.
Because you cannot assume that everybody has got a good webcam, that everybody has got a decent laptop, that everybody has got a microphone and stuff like that. So if you're expecting a minimum level of technical delivery from your people, make sure that you equip them with, an adequate level of technical backup, to deliver that, because you can't assume that everybody has the home equipment to support a professional.
So could that be, delivery. I apologize. Can that be like a prerequisite? Like you must have these like tools of the trade. If you're going to be a carpenter, you need to have, a hammer, right? So if you're going to be part of a virtual team, here's the tools that you're going to have to do this job effectively, to be able to communicate. So either make it a prerequisite for those folks on your team or be able to provide those tools for them.
Yeah, I think one or the other. And I mean, it obviously depends on the industry that you're in and the teams that you're in or whatever, whether you're going to provide that stuff or whether you're going to say, well, here's the standard that we use on our team. You need a 1080p webcam, you need an external mic, you need a blah, 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 whatever it is. So there's that stuff. But fundamentally, the real question comes down to communication. So what you're trying to do is set up effective modes of communication. How do we get to that point remotely where we can just talk to each other? Yeah. Hi, Craig, how are you doing?
And make it natural.
That kind of stuff. The stuff that we would get in the corridor, in the office or at the water cooler or in the kitchen or the diner area or whatever it is. And that doesn't just happen with a virtual team.
Right.
So, and I mean, I've gone through many instances where, we've created a project team, perhaps from people in India and the US and Europe and South America or whatever. And to start to create that initial bond of trust, if you like, and knowing each other, you need to be more intentional about some of the early communications in those teams. So you need to spend some time off task and actually just get to know people. Yeah. So, the first meeting of a new team, it wouldn't be, okay, here's the project, here's the deadline, here's the job, task. Yeah. The first meeting would be, hi, Craig. So we've not met before. Tell me about yourself. You married, kids? What do you do when you're not, working as an insurance salesman or whatever? Yeah. And actually turn that name on a Zoom window into a real person. Because until you know a little bit more about them, until you've had chance to just hang out for a little while and find out a bit about them, then trust doesn't build up.
Sure. And you also don't know how to motivate them.
That's right.
If you don't know anything about them, you don't know what motivates them. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, I think we all respond to personal relationship. I mean, we don't have to fall in love with each other. We don't have to be best buddies, but we need to see each other as people rather than as just cogs in a machine.
Yeah. And I think that that's going to be something that is going to need a lot of work going forward because we, as connected as we are getting, right? The world's getting more and more connected, but at the same time, we're getting more and more disconnected because it's all virtual. It's not interpersonal. And so we're able to speak with each other and communicate with each other more often and easier, but it's not as personal of a connection as it would be if you're standing in front of somebody, shaking their hand, give them a hug, and having that small talk, because now the small talk is kind of starting to fall to the wayside because now that we're virtual, everything's going so virtual, it's a little bit more straight to the point. As you just mentioned, you're kind of like task, straight to the point, getting the communication across and going, and you're losing that personal touch. And I think that's probably what's going to start setting more businesses apart from each other is the businesses who are staying personal and treating their employees, even though they may be virtual. And same thing with our customers, because if the employees are virtual, customers are going to be too. And, I think it's smarter because for the most part, anytime that you can efficiently run your business virtually, it's you don't have the overhead. I mean, obviously there's still going to be some overhead. You still have to have the equipment and the way to do it, but it is, a brick and mortar, you don't have the leases and the rent and, the utilities and all that stuff that, hey, now I'm going to run it virtually. We could just, everybody has their computers and we can do our own thing. But that personal touch is something that I hope never goes away. And I think that we're going to, and then it's going to come back.
Sales is always about relationship selling. You buy from somebody, you don't buy something, you buy from somebody.
Right.
Of all the ways that we take care of those that we love, the most important is providing the care they need when they need it most. Sawyer Health Solutions. Go to SawyerHealthSolutions.com for a free health insurance quote.
And I think, the old thing of most people don't leave a company, they leave a bad boss.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it was really interesting when I came on before this podcast. So I mean, we've never spoken before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you spent 5 or 10 minutes and we just hung out, didn't we? And we were talking about your coffee machine that had broken and,
Damn that coffee machine.
That's right.
Killing me this morning.
Yeah. That's right. But I mean, so before we actually started into talking, about the virtual stuff, we actually just spent a few minutes and got to know each other a little bit. And that's really, really important. But I think as a virtual team lead, one of the things you have to do with your teams is you have to build that time in now to meetings. So whenever I set up a virtual meeting, what I'll do is I'll allow that first 10 minutes just to be catch-up time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't start the agenda on the hour. I start the agenda at like 15:15. And we'll spend 10 minutes just doing the room and saying, Craig, I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks. How are things?
What's been going on? Yeah.
What's been going on? That's right. Your kid was sick last time we spoke. How are they doing? And, how are you feeling? And you've got a haircut. Yeah, I still can't get a haircut.
It's funny how that's become a topic.
Hasn't it? Oh dear. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's really important. The personal touch.
Yeah.
Is something that you consciously have to build into the process now. You can't be task all the time. You've got to, some calls don't even talk about work. As a boss, if you've got people around the country or whatever, just give them a call and just say, how are you doing? Yeah. This isn't a work call. This is just a how you doing call. Okay. We're not talking work today. I don't want to hear about your figures. I don't want to hear about the leads you're following at the moment. Just 5 minutes, 10 minutes or whatever. Just how you doing? Is how can I help you? There's this lovely phrase called servant leadership. A guy called Greenleaf came up with this years ago. And a servant leadership is not all touchy-feely, soft and kind of fluffy. Servant leadership is, how can I help you? And it's really powerful. Okay. So if you're in a leadership position, whether you're a team lead or you're a boss or you're a manager, whatever your title is, okay, if you can be there for your people and they feel that you're there for them. So you're checking in with them, not to beat up on them about their sales targets or their figures or whatever, but just, you give a damn about them. Yeah. As a person. And if they feel that you care about them as a person, yeah. Oh, have you've been going through some tough times or whatever. Is there anything I can do to help? Yeah.
Yeah. And just be a person. Just be a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's very important to remember. It always has been, but now more than ever, because,
now more than ever.
Especially with COVID, we're all feeling isolated.
Yeah.
And human beings are not built to be alone. We're built for companionship. We need to be around each other. It's very bad on mental health to be alone. And I think that that's a very important aspect. And some people may not get it from, family members or friends. No. And so I think that we do have a role to play as leaders within the company to be sure that we are at least being attentive to the well-being, the mental well-being and emotional well-being of our employees, because you should care about them. As more than just numbers, as more than just employees. So I think that's very important to remember and very good advice. When we're communicating, because there are so many different ways, and I know that everybody talks about Zoom, and we're on Zoom today. 10 years ago, it was Skype. All you heard about was Skype, right? When you're doing these video calls. They are still around. I know you don't hear don't hear their name too much, but they are still around. And there's a number of different ones, StreamYard and multiple ones that way as well. But not just necessarily the methods, not necessarily the name of the company that you're using, but what's the best ways to communicate? Is it through video? Is it through phone calls, conference calls? What are some of the best methods to communicate with your teams?
I think as you're starting a team, use video as much as you can.
Makes it a little bit more personal.
Because you need that face-to-face, you need the body language, you need to just get a sense of the person. And it's still the best way of doing that remotely is through video. So I encourage my teams to use video wherever possible on calls. But once they know each other, and particularly once they know each other and they've had chance to physically interact, and when I was running my global teams, one of the things I always encouraged was that team members traveled to other teams and spent a week with them. So over time, all the teams kind of cross-pollinated and they'd spent time physically with each other. That's and cool. Stuff like that, which works so well because now you rang, if I was ringing you up, I ring you up. We're not on a video call and it's, hi Craig, how are you doing? You're like, and we've hung out and we know each other and we've exchange stuff, and I've got a sense that you're really good at coding or you're really good at this, and I know you. So I think that's important. You don't need video all the time. Video is tough, mentally, and especially if you're putting your own face up on the video. Yeah. Zoom has an option in the options to turn off your own video.
Right.
Okay. And what I very often do is on these group calls and things, especially if I'm teaching a class or whatever, I'll check my video and I'll kind of, I'll adjust the camera to move myself on the screen or whatever. And I'll say, right, I'm going to put myself there. That's fine. And then I turn off my video. Okay. And there was an interesting study actually came out of, I think it was Stanford 3 or 4 weeks ago. One of the professors there's done some research on this, and basically that's one of the things that contributes to Zoom fatigue.
Okay.
This absolute exhaustion that you get when you've been on Zoom for 3 or 4 hours or whatever. It's because we're not used to looking at our own faces all the time, and if you can turn your own face off, you actually reduce that Zoom fatigue a lot. So have everybody else's face on, that's fine, but turn your own off.
Okay.
That's one thing to do. But also I do a lot of phone call now. Yeah. So I mean, email is a miserable way of communicating. Yeah. Email is kind of, making sure that you've got stuff in black and white, and it's very easy for clarity to send instructions or get stuff back. But I find actually just picking the phone up and just having an audio conversation with people. Very often people will send me an email and it's quite a long, involved email. First thing I do is I pick the phone up and I ring them. Yeah.
It's become a rarity. I mean,
it's become a rarity, and people are really
texting
surprised.
And everything else now, right? So,
Joe, wasn't expecting to hear from you.
Right.
Oh, well, actually, I was expecting to hear from you because you always ring, but most people don't.
Right.
Most people will spend half an hour replying to that long, complicated email, whereas a 5-minute phone call would have been more personal, would have answered all the questions quicker, and been a far more effective and efficient use of your time.
Right.
Yeah. And it's cheap to call long distance now as well.
Oh, yeah. Remember? Oh, geez. I know we're showing our age there, but I remember when you had to have a really good long distance plan with your phone or call after 9 p.m., right? It was like,
that's right.
Things are different after 9.
Those, yeah.
Oh, geez. I got to stop talking about stuff like that. So let's touch a little bit on, I know we've talked about like more the business aspect of this, but I think it's almost a direct relation when you're talking about teaching. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show here, my wife is a teacher. Yep. So when you're talking about teaching students, and in her case, younger students, she teaches 8th grade language arts. Obviously that was all in-person teaching prior to COVID. And then all of a sudden, boom, they got to teach from home. Now that's not it's an easier transition for the teachers than it is for the students.
Yeah.
Just out of maturity and things like that. And it was not easy for the teachers. But when you're talking 13, 14-year-old kids who are now left at home by themselves, mom and dad are at work, and they have to log onto their computer at whatever time, and they have to sit in front of their laptop and watch teacher, the discipline's not always there to do that, right? I mean, if you're a kid, what would you be doing? I'd turn the laptop on and go back to bed, right? Yeah, and she sees absolutely. A lot of that. So I know that's probably one part you can't really necessarily help, but as far as the teachers are concerned, what are some effective methods for teachers to keep those students engaged and actually interested enough to sit there when they're not being watched, right? The parents aren't home, they're not being watched. What's a good way to get them engaged enough to actually pay attention and sit there and learn?
It's an interesting one. There's a few things that I'd kind of throw in here. One is, don't make the assumption that everybody has a laptop, because they don't. There's a huge digital divide out there. Mm-hmm. So you've got to assume that some kids are going to be coming in on a phone or a tablet, that they haven't got a laptop at home. So that's one thing. Don't make any assumptions on connectivity and kit. Try and be as personal as possible. One of the nice things about Zoom from a teaching perspective is that you've got everybody's name.
Sure. It does make it easier to remember, right?
If I get a new class of 40 or 50 students, as I did in September, mm-hmm. I met my students once in September. And we had one induction session of an hour, and they were all in this huge room, all wearing masks, sitting 6 feet apart. And then the following day, the lockdown just shut down. And I've never met any of my students this year, apart from that one time, which has been really, really difficult. But I know everybody's name. And I knew everybody's name faster than I have ever done before in class, because their names are all underneath the window. So one of the things is use people's names. Okay. Don't just ask a question. Say, right, Craig. Yeah. What do you think about? Yeah. Yeah. And actually now Craig listens and kind of will generally answer and stuff like that.
So you're talking more specifically to individual students as you go, as opposed to just talking to the whole class all at one time and being general.
Definitely. And what I've done is tried to stop talking at my class. And I've tried to start making the lectures, rather than being lectures, in fact, I don't even call them lectures anymore. I call them sessions. So I've changed the language. Okay. I don't say that I'm a lecturer anymore. Okay. I facilitate sessions. Yeah. But that kind of language is important because it communicates a different thing, doesn't it? If we're going to have a session rather than a lecture is me pushing information at you, isn't it? Whereas a session, the expectation is, a session.
It's more personal and involved.
I'm going to have to contribute. There's going to be a discussion. I'm going to be asked to contribute in some way. So we use breakout rooms an awful lot. I will populate the class with questions and stuff like that. Another little trick is use the chat. Okay. Whether you're on Zoom or you're on WebEx or you're on Teams or whatever, they all have a chat option. That window can be incredibly powerful. So if we're talking about, whatever it is, what I say to everybody is, if you've got any really interesting information, or you've read a book, or you came across a good website, or there's a decent video, or there's a film about it, or whatever, stick it in the chat. Okay. And as people get used to this, that chat now becomes another communication channel alongside the video that's going on. We've used this on some classes with WhatsApp instead of chat. Right? Open up a WhatsApp group for the class. Some people love to just type on their phone all the time and stuff. My wife, she texts constantly and she's on WhatsApp all the time and stuff. So again, open up the different channels that people are actually using already. Things like Mentimeter is an online polling tool. Okay. So I use a lot of Menti polls in my sessions now. And we'll do 10 or 15 minutes on something, and maybe I'll throw them into a breakout room and randomize the group. So they're dealing with new people that they're not talking to normally. And they have 15 minutes to come up with something around a question that I've thrown them into the group on. And then they come back. And then what I do is I'll open up something like a Jamboard, which is a shared kind of whiteboard. And I'll say, okay, so each of the teams now just log on to that Jamboard and throw down the 3 things that you came up with. And in real time, I'm sharing that screen and you're seeing the Jamboard get populated with all these ideas and stuff. And now the next half hour, we just pick up on the ideas. And I say, right, who put that idea up on the screen? That's fantastic. Do you want to just talk at that for a minute? And then that student will come on and talk about it, or that group will come on and talk about it. And then the other groups will riff off that. And you've done a 2-hour session.
And people like seeing their names.
Oh, they love it.
People like seeing their names in print. I'm one of those people, right? Like, you don't have to, give me the attaboys, but just seeing my name up there that I've achieved something, or, whatever the case is. And if you're in that chat box, in most cases, as long as you put your name in at the beginning of the session, you're going to see your name as the person who's asking that question. Now that could also go the opposite way. Like if you're a little shy about somebody, or you think that somebody thinks that you're asking a stupid question, you may not put it in there. But I think that's a great idea, because you can have that in there. The teacher can still do their, whatever it is that they're teaching, their program that they're teaching, without being interrupted.
Yes.
And it can be in the chat box. You can let it sit there for 5 or 10 minutes, until you get done talking about whatever it is that you're talking about. And then you can come back to it. Hey, now, as we were going through that, a couple questions popped up in the box. Let me get to those. Sally asks, and then you can, read it out loud. Great question. So, and then go into the explanation of
and
that.
now
I
Sally
really like
feels
that.
really happy. Sally, he noticed my question and he asked about it.
Right.
And as a teacher, you generally know which of the students are the contributors and which of the students are the sit back and very, often say nothing. And what you'll often find is that if you give the quiet students another channel to communicate on that isn't necessarily one where they actually have to speak, but maybe they just type. And even an anonymous channel as well, something like maybe Jamboard, where you can type your thing in, but it doesn't come up with your name next to it, but you can contribute the idea. Yeah. You'll get a lot more interaction from students when you're doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Which is great, but you've got to give people kudos. Sally, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. And now Sally's sitting there at home, feeling, she's got that warm and fuzzy feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about a lot of the do's, some of the best ways. What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the things that you've seen people do that you're like, oh, it just makes you cringe, that you definitely don't want to do? What are the things that you just want to stay away from? The kryptonites that you want to stay away from when you're doing the teaching online or coaching online, or just, interacting with your team? What are the things you definitely don't want to do?
I think one of the things that I've encouraged all my students and people that I'm coaching who are perhaps looking for a job, for instance. Yeah. Cause I do quite a lot of coaching of people who are job seekers and stuff like that. I give them some tips and tricks around presenting well on Zoom. So whether you're using a background because you've got a messy house or whatever, or whatever, get yourself some lighting so that you're lit from the front and you're not dark and all the rest of it. Because right now the Zoom window is your first impression. So you got to make a good one. Yeah. So don't sit there with a window behind you and the sun streaming in through the back and nobody can see you and they can't hear you and you're constantly moving around and, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So learn, if you like, the basics of presenting yourself well. If you were going for an interview in person, you'd kind of dress up and you'd clean your shoes and you'd show up on time and you'd smile and all that. We know that stuff, don't we? But nobody's ever taught anybody how to do a Zoom call.
Yeah, maybe there needs to be some classes on that now that it's become
I've been running classes on that for the last year, and I think that's important. So that's definitely a don't. Is don't underestimate the importance of presenting yourself well on a Zoom call. Don't assume that everybody has got the same level of kit and the same access and the same broadband connection. Yeah. So you've got to allow for that. You've got to allow for that because it's very easy when you have got a good connection, and I'm really lucky. I was able to upgrade my broadband connection to 1 gigabyte broadband. I've got fiber coming into the house now. So we can have like 4 Zoom calls going on at the same time and the kids can be playing Roblox and it doesn't matter, But some people are limited to very slow connection speeds, maybe just through the phone or whatever. So you mustn't make assumptions because that will cause a them and us. And if you make those assumptions, even unknowingly, you are, if you like, you're dissing the people who don't have the good stuff. And it makes them look bad in front of everybody else, and the rest of the team and stuff like that. And then they feel bad. And now that's a kind of vicious circle, isn't it? So as leaders, we've got to be really, really careful about that kind of thing at the moment. And we've also got to be, whether we like it or not, we've also got to be counselors because a lot of people are going through mental stress at the moment and you don't know who's going through what when. So you've constantly got to be asking that question.
Keep it personal.
Yeah, keep it personal. Are you okay? It's okay not to be okay. You might not want to tell everybody in open forum that you're not okay,
right.
But you've got to make it okay for them to tell you. Anybody isn't okay and wants to talk to me, give me a call anytime.
What do you see as the next step, the next natural progression from where we were a year ago, pre-COVID, because everything's different especially when it comes to the virtual teaching, virtual coaching, just the virtual presence period, has progressed so much in the last year. Where do you see the next 2 to 5 years? Where do you see the next progression coming in?
It's hybrid. I mean, I think at the moment we're at home, aren't we? You know, I mean, unless you're a frontline worker or you've got to be, you know, we're out working or whatever. Anybody who doesn't have to be working in the office at the moment is working from home. That's not optimal. Like you said, we're social animals. We need some interaction. So I think what we're going to end up with is many, many jobs now moving to, you know, 2 days a week in the office, 3 days a week at home, or some, you know, variation on that theme, if you like. I think we're going to see a shift in offices, much more hot desking. You know, we don't need everybody to have their own cubicle necessarily anymore, or their own office anymore. We just need them a network point or a Wi-Fi access. You know, they can come in and just set their laptop down and whatever. So the equipment that we issue staff with is going to become much more important than it ever was before. The security implications are also, you know, more iffy there. So we've got to think about VPNs and security access. And,
I tell you what, when you brought that up, I'm thinking, man, that could be a whole show right there. Because Absolutely. Now that everybody is online, everybody's faces are online. Yes. You know, that is going to be a big issue. And I think you're right. VPNs and online security is going to be a major hot topic coming up very, very soon as well.
It is. And, you know, I mean, I don't know whether GDPR is something in the US, but certainly in Europe, this whole thing of data privacy, with kind of, you know, can you even record people's faces? Yeah. So, I mean, certainly one of the kind of etiquettes now at the beginning of every Zoom call is, we're recording. If you're not happy about being recorded, please leave the call now. And that's important. I'm seeing a lot more moves in accessibility. I do a lot of camera club talks to an older demographic of, you know, 50 plus very often, people. We now have incredible technology which can transcribe the call in real time. We could turn on subtitles now, and Zoom has Otter.ai built in now, and it'll actually transcribe the call in the bottom of your window so that you can see it. I use that with my students all the time because a lot of my students are Chinese or Indian or whatever. English isn't a first language. Yeah. But the automatic transcription makes it far easier for them to keep up with what's being said, and comprehend what's being said. So this confluence of all these different things is going to come in, but definitely it's going to be hybrid. Yeah.
You know, humans progress. And sometimes it takes major tragedy to push it forward faster. And I've said since the beginning, since the first month or two of COVID last year, that this is going to change things forever. But everybody talks about that new normal like it's a bad thing. There's a new normal, but the new normal is just progression in technology. You know, just a different way that we do things. And it's not necessarily a negative thing at all. It's a lot of times it's a positive thing. And some of the best inventions and things like that have come from bad times because it forces you to think in a different way. And I think that's what we're experiencing right now. So I think there's going to be some growing pains. I think we're going to see a few, you know, setbacks or, you know, barricades and obstacles along the way as you do. But I think in general, this is going to change business. It's going to change relationships, or at least how we think of traditional relationships. It is going to change that as well. But the workplace, I think, is going to be the most permanent change. Restaurants, you know, I'm already seeing a lot of, you know, payment differences now. Now you scan that QR code and you can just pay on an app on your phone. Because when we were talking about, you know, identity theft and things like that, people are always so cautious about identity theft. But yet when you go to a restaurant and you pay for your bill, you give them your credit card and they take it away from you for 5 minutes into a back room and they come back, right? What'd you do with my card? Were you taking a picture of it? Because now your signature's on the back and everything. They can take a picture of that. Now they can forge your signature. And so small things like that we probably just didn't even think about. And now you can just scan the QR code right there on the table, pay for everything right there and go. So, and a lot of that has come up in the last, 8 to 12 months. It was spurred by COVID. So some of these technology changes, I think, are going to last forever, or at least get a whole different realm of thinking going on to change things going forward. Joe, that's our time for today. Thank you so much for chatting with us. If you wouldn't mind, take a moment, let the listeners know how they can reach out to you, ask you more questions, and learn a little bit more from you.
Yeah, well, it's been great talking to you, Craig. I've really enjoyed it. The time has flown.
Yes,
you can email me at joe.houghton@gmail.com. And my website is houghton.consulting. And I'm sure you'll put a link in the show notes to those. I'll send you the links and stuff. But yeah, anybody wants to talk about, anything we've talked about today, if I can help, I'll be only too happy to.
I love the brainstorm sessions. I love, talking with people, and because I have my opinions on this stuff, you have your knowledge on this stuff, and it actually spurs a little bit of thought. And, we can, maybe this will work. So I like having these types of talks and everything. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day today, halfway across the world, doing the whole virtual thing here. So I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to talk to each other again soon.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Craig.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you for joining us this week. Go to our website at thebizreveal.com to catch all of our past episodes. We're available on all podcast apps, or you can watch any of our episodes on the Biz Reveal YouTube channel. I'm Craig Sawyer, and this is the Biz Reveal. Till next time.